Hey, Stephen here, as always, with Coping with COVID. Today we have our first segment for Teaching Behind the Mask. I'm joined today by fellow experienced teacher Eleanor, who is a science teacher. She teaches chemistry as well as chemistry for English language learners. So Eleanor, go ahead and introduce yourself, and I want to thank you right away for being on the show today.
Sure. Thanks, Stephen. I'm Eleanor. I teach in the northwest suburbs at a public high school. We are a Title I school, and we have a range of types of students and learners. I'm actually not sure how many years I've been teaching because I lost count. It's in the order of 17 or 18 years. And I have two children. They are age 14, so my daughter will be starting high school, not at the same high school that I'll be teaching at, and my son who will be starting third grade. So this spring, I was doing the remote teaching and the remote facilitation of their remote learning also. So as many parents and teachers, I'm sure we're in the same boat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very powerful. So March, right, where this all started, I'll kind of jump back there for a moment. People who have listened to, been following my podcast for a while know, I've talked about this before, that what a Friday the 13th that was. At least for my organization, we were scrambling to make packets to send home. And this was before, this was just like when it was Act of God days, before they even instituted remote learning. And the remote learning planning week as well. And essentially when that happened, there was that huge delay of where it was just, for the longest time, it was like, oh, it's not really in this country. There's some people that, maybe like 13 cases. I was teaching the students about what's going on, lockdown in Wuhan, and we're talking about, managing anxiety. And then the next second, it's like here. That's the way it seemed, obviously. And the remote learning for us was a combination of, it was a lot of, filling out remote learning logs. I'm very by the book with, making sure that everything is documented, both communications and instructional opportunities provided. We did a really, really good job on that. Our school did a very good job on that, our whole organization. But it's very interesting because we were all in the same situation, that we all sort of had to create a plan on the fly, right? And the idea is that, next time, if we go back to remote learning, it's probably going to look more like formalized e-learning. The first time we did mostly, for some students, we were using work packets. For some students, we were using, we're doing different sorts of internet things. Like I was creating some instructional videos to work on social emotional development, because it's hard to do that with, I don't want to do that just through packets and stuff, but we're continuing to look at ways to make that better, and we're probably going to end up using Google Classroom. What did remote learning for you look like back in March when it first went into effect?
Sure. We were really blessed because our school has been a one-to-one technology school for many years now. So our students have iPads, and we have adopted, as a district, a learning management system. We have to use Schoology, and some teachers build their own websites, as well. So, but our courses through the learning management system were already established, and depending on how the individual teachers use them, the students were used to the routines and the norms of checking in with the website, or how to submit assignments, and different tools. So that technology aspect was better for the transition. Our district, the first week, thankfully the shelter in place took place right around the spring break. So we had that time, to kind of process and reflect and so on. And we worked with our professional learning communities to kind of figure out what things would look like. But our district also made a modified schedule. Instead of trying to touch base with every period, 1 through 8 every single day, they stretched out the week so that every day had a longer chunk of time to check in with your students. And that check-in could be different for different classes. So what I ended up doing for example, like a Monday morning period 1 check-in, which was 9:30 to 11:30, I would post in my Schoology platform, and I would email students, and I would post it, in their grading system, so that there was no way that anybody could miss anything. And I would post an update right before. I would say, okay, it would be the equivalent of like a classroom warm-up. I'd say before our time, then complete this. I did a Google form, so complete this little check-in form, or read this 5-minute article, whatever your warm-up is for the class. And then we would check in on Zoom, and I kept those Zooms short, and I kept it something that was like a shared experience. So putting them in breakout groups. One time we did like a little experiment on studying half-life, which is the amount of time it takes like a medicine to decrease in efficacy, or in the context of COVID, it was when the Department of Homeland Security just came out with the newest results of what is the half-life of COVID on different surfaces and different conditions. I thought, well, this fits in with chemistry. So we did a experiment together on Zoom.
Right.
Everybody has to bring 10 objects, and we're going to shake them, and we're going to graph them together, and so on. So some sort of shared experience. And then at the end of the Zoom time together, I said, I'm going to stay on, but you're welcome to log off. And then you're going to work on this next thing. But you're also welcome to stay on, and if you want to just work with each other, and in what's called sort of like a companionable silence, right? They could just stay logged on. They could turn their camera and their voice off, but then like 15 minutes later, they'd be like, Miss P, like, I have a question, that sort of thing. In terms of, and so every week was different. I tried not to have anything that was sustained. I wasn't married to the content because of, the nature of the uncertainty of things, and because like the grading policy was to do no harm, and the attendance was somewhat sporadic, and also I focused a lot on remediation for students who had gaps in their learning, who had extended absences beforehand. This was a great opportunity.
Right.
So we created a lot of modules for that as well. So there was a lot of office hours that we did, since we weren't meeting instructionally for as many hours during the day. So that's what that looked like. And then there were, we put together like a menu of enrichment activities for students to do, and always in the context of, this is high school, we know a lot of you have goals for post-high school, and this is we know these times are difficult, but this is your chance to sharpen your skills and to keep learning, and to become a global citizen that's aware of how to interpret data and information and apply that. So we put together a lot of those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's very powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so like I said, with us the first time, just to give people some context, I'm 5 years experience with it. I've always focused on alternative school. So I'm special education, learning behavior specialist, alternative school for emotional behavioral deficits. And that made it, I think this has been challenging for everybody in different ways. But in addition to that going on, we've had students that did not have access to technology.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the big things, as I said before, is going to be a much more emphasis on e-learning. We did have staff in my organization that did that. Some of us in the high school supplemented with that. The junior high was able to use that more, and it was very effective. With our students, the packets kind of became I called it the opt-out. So that was the default, because that was what we were able to provide most reliably. Packets were the opt-out, and then there was some additional e-learning stuff through Apex, as well as some other supplemental things. Like I created content on YouTube and stuff, but there was some Apex stuff, online learning, that was opt-in as well. There were some students that were able to make a lot of progress on that as well. And we, like I said, we did a lot of documenting with both communicating to the parents, what, instructional opportunities were provided, the minutes that the packets were supposed to accompany, or supposed to take up in terms of that. And, I noticed that through what I was doing, in the probably the month or so before everything even shut down, was I primarily teach science as well, high school science, but I teach integrated, right? It's an integrated science. I call it, I kind of made up my own term, cross-continuity science instruction, right? And so that means that there's students that might need different, they might need some life science, they might need earth science, they might need physical science. And so what I do is I blend that either into one lesson, or I will segment the class into different parts. So for example, I was teaching about earth science, we were doing weather, right? And so I would address earth and physical concepts into that first portion of the class. And then I would do a B unit in life science about pathogens, and I would connect that to COVID-19. And we started doing that, and that naturally led to what I was providing them during the shutdown. It was a lot of stuff that was based on COVID theme, and I also I taught at the time a career readiness class, and I did a lot with how can we be more productive at home.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really important. And one of the lessons that I'm most proud of that happened shortly before the shutdown was I did a science lesson on, we were doing space science at the time, and I was able to, I showed a TED Talk of Chris Hadfield. And it just so happened that by chance, I purposely incorporated curriculum of, it was like life, physical, and earth, right? Because you have the earth in space, then you have the astronomy, and as well, because it was also talking about the rocket technology. So then you not only get the earth, you get the space, the physical science. And then he also in the TED Talk talked about spiders just by chance. He talked about different organisms and stuff. So you have the life science. And then he talked about his own emotional management during that, to go out in space. So it's like I touched on the personal growth and development aspect of it. And then he also plays guitar and he's sang. And then I also teach music appreciation. So it's like it's like 5 different things in one. And I tried to apply that mindset in the way I was planning remotely, which is, it's very hard to do it justice, in a packet, but I always tried to make the work big picture stuff, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic, and I really wanted to focus on, and I'm going to make the bold claim that it's not just with students with emotional concerns. We need to focus on that with all students, and I'll get your opinion on that in a second. But I think that when we return, I think that the biggest priority, because we can literally be shut down again rapidly, either widespread like closed, or it could be, well, we need to quarantine because of this exposure, that exposure. And I think that one thing I would advocate, especially being a mentor teacher there, is I would advocate that we focus on remote learning skills, remote self-management, because it wasn't effective for everybody, right? In fact, for the majority, it was probably a struggle. We need to focus on, instead of just jumping right into, oh my gosh, the kids are so behind now, we need to focus on the practical skill of how do we work at home? How are we going to make this better? And that's something I want to address here, is how can we do that, right? What are some different ways that we can really teach the students? We're probably going to be remote again sooner rather than later. Here's how you can do that more effectively. What would be something that you would think we could do in regards to that?
I hear what you're saying. I was actually thinking about that when you talked about the packets, because I, tried to I kept a log of how did I hear from each student every week. It could have either been through email, the Google Form check-in, or through Zoom, or if they submitted an assignment through our learning management system. And some students I only, heard from out of one of the 4 modes. Some students I heard from none at all, or I only hear from once every 3 weeks. But then with the packet method, I was thinking, how would they touch base with you? But I also had some students, without Wi-Fi or internet. So then the school would work together to get them like a hotspot. And I would snail mail, packets to them at home, and I actually put in like an envelope and like a stamp and so on. And we did a lot of phone calls. But I hear what you're saying about the workflow. And I think it was overwhelming for a lot of students, because in school, they're used to the bell telling them what to do next. And they're used to sitting in a desk and being told what to do. in sense, even if they're taking ownership of their learning, it's like the schedule follows itself. Whereas with the structure that we had, they became more like adults, right? They had to check all their emails and check Infinite Campus and check their Schoology and put all the different Zoom codes or different deadlines in their own calendar. So I tried, and so I don't think I did a good job of helping students navigate that. What I just defaulted was to just, the students actually asked me, there's an app called, if you've heard of Remind 101, where it's like you could set up like a texting thing where you never see their phone number and they never see yours with class code. So the students were begging me like, please, other teachers said Remind 101, and they just like Remind 101 us like right before class starts, and they Remind 101 us like every time like something is due, and they just keep reminding 101 us all the time. I'm like, but that means I'm a slave to the phone then. That means like I'm the one checking all the deadlines and Remind 101ing all 5 of my sections. So yeah, I personally am not good at training students on, executive functioning and organization, but I do.
And that's going to be something that's so big, because especially since the biggest change that I forgot to mention, in addition to the fact that, okay, if we go back to remote learning, it's going to be less of just remote learning framework. It's going to be more e-learning specifically, not just as, supplemental, it's going to be minimal of, and the other thing is it's going to count in lieu of, that's the thing. Before it was, it would be, it can only help their grade, the worst case to get an incomplete. Now this is going to be in lieu of the real deal. So, in Illinois right now, the numbers they're going up ish, I mean, the problem is that we were, I've praised the state many times before. We were the first state to meet the CDC guidelines, and we had the best decrease for a while, and we're still doing pretty good. The problem is that, as we get closer, right, there's been, I mean, I just had somebody I know that just got COVID positive, and it's very challenging for me to see, and I hope I'm wrong, but it's very challenging for me to see how this won't rapidly close us back down in multiple ways, because you have a widespread shutdown, you have this person's quarantining, this person's out but can teach remotely.
I would agree. I agree. And I think that the schools starting with a plan either to be totally remote or presenting it as, if we do go remote, or if we do open, then this is our transition to going remote, because that way if things go remote, then the students won't see it as failure. They won't be like, oh, here we go again. And then,
that's a good point. That's a very good point.
It's a lot about how, as teaching, it's a lot about how you market things to student. Like, this is your opportunity to demonstrate your mastery,
Right. All about
something like that. So, for example, like if the school opened and in their mind they really thought, well, might only be for like a week or two, they could say, this is our back to school boot camp, where you get to know everyone, and then we before we go into remote learning, just different ideas for presentation.
That's a very good idea. And I mean, honestly, there's a lot of concerns that I've been sort of the person that's, I don't want to say extreme, but I've sort of been on the end of like safest rather than sorry at all, and I've said, hey, there's concerns with some districts are, I'll say, like, I know Plainfield, a lot of people are praising them because it's like, it makes sense, right? If we are reopening in phases with 5 phases, maybe have a school's sub plan under that. I think it has like three phases maybe where it starts remote. I think that's a great idea. And it's all there so that you can kind of switch back and forth as it's appropriate.
It's a measure.
Right. Whereas I feel like a lot of us are sort of, and nothing is, for the most part, as far as I'm still aware, for the most part, as of this present moment on Thursday when we're recording this, which is also when this episode will go up, a lot of it is still, nothing's set in stone, especially for the districts that are going to do mostly in person. The thing, the harsh truth, and this is just, people can disagree with me, but like I said, I'm more on the safe side. The harsh reality when it comes to something that's this contagious is even a hybrid model is not going to offer you that much protection, the idea of being in person, right? So it's going to be a challenge to have students keep face coverings on, you know, all the time. That's going to be a challenge, right? And there's probably going to be, yeah. And the thing is that, you know, some districts are doing, you know, students are going to eat lunch, you know, in the classroom. Some of them are doing grab and go. So we provide it, they take it home. You know, some people want the kids there as much as possible. And I get that. I get that. And I think that, you know, it's good on them for, you know, everybody has the way they feel they can make the most difference as an educator, right? The problem is that to me, we're going through all this trouble to set these guidelines of, you know, mandatory masking, social distancing, and then you put lunch in there. I mean, you can't, to me, that's like, you know, there's evidence showing, okay, this spreads through indoor dining and bars. So do we want to recreate that in our classroom when we've spent all this time with the mask on, and then now we got to take it off and they're going to talk, and basically you've got an indoor dining situation that could potentially spread this, right? And
those are hard questions, but then, but it's a long day to go without eating. I mean, these are hard things. I mean, there's a couple things that you said that, I mean, I'll be honest, you have to talk about the quarantine, what is it, the quarantine 19 pounds or something, but I actually lost 10 pounds since quarantine, which is not something I desired. You know, it's actually like a negative, like, you know, like hanging off me. And for some of maybe like stress or, you know, but I noticed, you know, they talk about the pandemic time being a time of forced experimentation, right? Like, you know, businesses have forced to change their model. So one of the small forced experimentations is, you know, because I have, like, if I'm out and about, I have the mask on, so then I'm not going to like be snacking. So, because I'm used to eating, you know, teachers, we eat like this, like in 5 minutes. So I would get a bulk of my calories, right, from like snarfing trail mix, you know, between periods, right, in the hallway, right, during passing period. So if I have the mask on, like I would notice that I was dehydrated because I was really thirsty because I'm not stopping to drink if I'm out and about running errands or something, because I don't want to take my mask off and, you know, get contaminated and my hands are dirty. So it's a change in behavior, right? So the mask enforcement and pattern has changed my behavior in a way that was negative for me, is that, you know, of weight change. So so the implications of lunch, you know, has many implications for students who may be like diabetic or like hypoglycemic or they might just be cranky, or, you know, because some students have a lunch at like 10:30 in the morning, right? Because they have like the first lunch. So those are tough considerations.
And those are all variables that have to be considered. And really the majority, like, you know, I think 95% plus of this is still more questions than there can be answers. And that's not really anybody's fault. It's just sort of, everybody wants to try to reopen right now, but it makes sense. I don't know if you've seen that graphic that's circulating around Facebook about, it says something like, this is why teachers are scared, because it says this here meant we need to close, but then this means we're going to reopen. I mean, I'll be very honest. I am the kind of person that super health anxious. Every symptom is, oh, I must have cancer. You know, I'm just that kind of person. And so for me, going back, I have set up a configuration for myself that's pretty much one step short of a hazmat suit. I mean, I have a P100 respirator, airtight goggles, and a face shield, and then I have a covering for the exhalation port to make it compliant, and work gloves. It's crazy. I'm gonna have to get used to teaching in that, because I wouldn't feel comfortable otherwise. And it's like, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna lie around that. I'm gonna be honest. This is what I need to feel, because otherwise I'm not gonna be effective anyway. You know. Because it's, you know, to me, this is something that the reality of this is that I have told people before to stop thinking of it as even a bad flu and think of it more as some kind of virus that can have lasting damage, right? I would put it more, at least for some people that get it, I would put it more in the category of an HIV, where there's post-viral symptoms, there's clotting, or post-viral syndromes is what I mean. And we don't know the extent to which you know, you get it, you recover, maybe you even have a mild case, but are you now like, do you have like heart damage now or something? Do you have to worry about heart disease at 28 years old. I mean, I worry about that anyway, but everyone's like, oh, stop, you know, but now is it like, oh no, now you really need to worry about it, you know? So my stance is I will do everything I can to keep myself and keep my students safe.
Right.
But the problem is, you know, there's only so much you can do. And I mean, have you thought about that? Like your own, where is sort of your comfort level on going back to the class?
Yeah, so I have three things come to mind. One is, one of the things about if we did in person, some sort of form of in person, is the one thing I'm dreading is the battle with the students who don't have buy-in, and the discord that will happen in the classroom between students and each other, you know, and the anxiety that will cause. For example, my daughter was doing a little bit of an informal preseason cross-country social running with only 7 girls, you know, and they were like running at a distance and so on, but only 2 girls were wearing masks, and she said one girl was very anxious and said, you know, you guys have to run apart, you know, you guys should be wearing masks, you have to like stay apart, and the other girls were kind of like, you know, and just a little bit of, you know, that discord, right? You know, and for high school, they're adolescents, right? And so normally when they are developing in that way and, you know, questioning authority and questioning rules and norms, you know, that's something to be encouraged, and you want to challenge, let them challenge that in a safe way. But this one I have to like, no, wear your mask, you know, but they don't necessarily see it that way. They don't see it as fact or debate in this country and in the environment. It's up for question. So that's the one thing I am dreading. What you said about like your full on, you know, Darth Vader garb.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it may sound odd, but I feel as if I were wearing all that, that would almost create a disconnect between me and my students who are only, because I told you I'm at a Title I school, who are only equipped with maybe a cloth mask or paper mask. You know, even though I would be saying like, well, I'm protecting, you know, you from me, but you know what I mean? Like if I can come with like $250 worth of gear, you know, and then they just have nothing, you know, and then I feel like that would, because I can afford it, and you know, I can go home and I can wash it. A lot of my students live in like mobile parks, or you know, or homeless. I feel like that would create sort of a disconnect. And something I always try throughout the COVID period was to model things that are based on best practice and sensible. So when everything started, a lot of my students were really distressed. They'd say, you know, Miss, you know, there's no hand sanitizer anywhere in any of the stores. And, you know, Miss, my mom went to 5 stores yesterday, you know, looking for soap and hand sanitizer or like Lysol. So being a chemistry teacher, then we looked at like hydrogen peroxide and how, you know, and soap and all those things. And I think trying to reassure them and help them feel empowered. So anyway, so with going back to school, like I'm not sure what I would wear. You know, I think I would try to wear the most that I could while still looking like them. But I would teach them, this is what I'm gonna do to keep us safe. So here, and I'll say, look, I've got the windows open because this is the research that says that. I've got all the curtains open. This is the research that says that, you know. I've got the fans blowing in this strategic way. I've got one fan with in air, one fan without air, you know, in these parts of the room, and this is why.
Yeah.
But this is the thing you can do in your home. I think that's one thing I would do there.
That's powerful. Yeah.
The third thing, right? I forget what it was. So.
No, that's very powerful, and that's my concern too. Is once we take all the precautions, I mean, once we do all the precautions, and then I, you know, do the things that I feel will make me comfortable in returning. Because I've seen a lot of teachers. You know, you and I connected on a group. Specifically about this, I see a lot of teachers not comfortable at all going back, and you know, I have gotten myself to the point where I am, because I'm, you know, I take my, you know, the organization that I work with, I'm very thankful to have that job, and I wouldn't give it up for anything. But at the same time, it's like I'm going to wear this stuff that, and you brought up a good point, I don't want to create a disconnect too. So it just seems like with all my main concern is with all the stuff that the things that we have to do to make this even possible, and all the logistical hurdles,
a lot of people, including myself, were very displeased with remote learning. But we were looking at it one-dimensionally. This is the point I want to end on. We were looking at it one-dimensionally, comparing it to what we had.
Right.
We're not going back to what we had. That's not going to happen for a very long time. And I mean, there's a really good motivational speaker and coach, Simon Sinek, who talks about that. And I've used his content in some of my classes. He says that forget about going back to normal. We have to focus. Basically, it's another form of saying we need to be present and look at where we are right now. And I think that for me, it's like I would rather be, you know, we need to make sure that we're investing time in, as I said before, making remote learning as good as it can be, because I really believe that it's not if, it's when.
Yes.
And at the same time, I want to deliver really good in-person instruction as well. And I'm really creative with the way I use technology in my classroom. And I believe that that's going to help the barrier between, you know, address some of those personal protective equipment concerns as well. But that being said, my closing thought on this for this episode is maximizing the time that we do have when we go back to really address how we're best going to make this year as productive as possible, knowing that what we learned from last year, the big takeaway is anything can really happen. So go ahead and give your, if you have a closing thought on this before we wrap this episode up.
Sure. You know, people ask me if I'm nervous about going back to school, and because there's so many unknowns, and I was really nervous about it, but because I don't know yet and there's so many unknowns, I've just said that it's so ludicrous, I can't worry about it yet. Maybe next week I will, once I know what's going on. So that's kind of where I am at now. But in terms of remote learning, that's something like I do have control over. So for me, technology, I'm a big proponent of that. Technology should be used to allow the students to create and to interact with each other, you know, not just as like a viewing, but
Right.
to comment and feedback on each other, or to share with each other, or to do something interactive. So I'm definitely going to continue that, using all the avenues available to me. And also, I think another key to remote learning will be to help to have students do more individualized things on their timeline, because some of my students got jobs and so on, and also to create accountability within whatever cohort that or class that they're placed in. So that can still be, you can still create accountability in the way you structure your lessons or tasks with each other. And I think they'll have more buy-in, because that's another one of my fears, that, you know, what happens if I just don't hear from students, and, you know, they're not there, and
Right.
they're home alone, you know, all day for an entire school year. Now what? So, but having that peer-to-peer accountability, I think, is going to be really key, since we're not, they're not going to have the presence of 200 plus caring adults, you know, watching over them and checking in on them day after day for 8 hours a day. So
I like that.
that's
I like that. Yeah, that's really good. I'm glad you shared that.